Welcome to the Heavy Revy Show. I am Josue Ibarra, and again, this is a podcast where we unpack heavy revelations that's going to help you grow into the best version of yourself. I'm super pumped and excited to introduce you to Colin Cruz as he teaches on his first Monday message airing on the Heavy Revy Show called Prove It. It's going to be awesome. Those of you who are new to the podcast, my name is Josue. I am the founder of the Heavy Revy Show, and we have Monday messages for you guys. Every Monday where we're going to be posting different things. You'll hear from different teachers that are going to encourage you and just build you up, and again, help you grow into the best version of yourself. All that to say, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, write a review, rate us on iTunes, and we will be feeding you awesome content. We love you, and check this intro out, and then Colin will come through.
A lot of things been on my mind lately. A lot of things I've been ruminating and contemplating. A lot of things have been stolen and taken by Satan. A lot of things I don't know about, I'm just trying to make it, but he can't faze me. Forget the 10, my Lord God made me. I ain't talking Mike Bill, word to the underground, yeah, we making noise. And if you didn't know about us, yeah, we them boys. We be spitting smoke.
Well, hey, what is going on, guys? This is Colin Cruz, and just want to say how much of an honor it is to be on the podcast. Let me speak to the integrity and the character of my man Josue Ibarra real quick. If you haven't been tuning in, haven't been listening, this is a place where you can find some seriously valuable content. And yeah, he may not be a heavy hitter like Andrew Womack, but he's definitely on his way. And if you keep listening, you just never know. Maybe one word from God might completely change your life. And the cool thing about God's word is that it doesn't even matter who the vessel is. It's the oil really that can change you. And so I want to encourage you to keep listening. And he's bringing on some really awesome guests. And so just want to say how much of an honor it is to really be a part of this and to have the chance to be able to kind of share what God's been speaking to me to you today. So my prayer is that you are, whether you're driving in your car or you're at the gym on the elliptical, or maybe you're just sitting in your living room trying to just wait out the quarantine, my prayer is that you are able to receive today. And so you could be listening 6 months from the time this was recorded, and pray that even now, that you are hearing with spiritual ears, that God is able to get through to your heart. And so today I'm excited because God's given me a word through the book of James. And I mean, let's just talk about James real quick, because James is like one of the most controversial books in the Bible. It feels like some theologians think that James shouldn't even be in the Bible. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, because it's like, okay, in one side, he's talking about, James is talking about how if you are a friend of the world, you're an enemy of God. And me and Josue were just having a conversation with a friend of ours about this. You're an enemy of God if you're a friend of the world. And they were relating it to, like, if you watch certain shows. And I'm like, man, like, bro, like, you mean you mean I can't watch Criminal Minds anymore? Like, because I watch Criminal Minds, I mean, hey, that's one of my favorite shows. I mean, Tiger King is super, hot right now. I mean, at least at this time. I don't know when you're going to be listening to this, but at the time that we're recording this, Tiger King is super hot. And, so I started to think, man, like, if you listen to Tiger King, or if you watch Tiger King, then you're like an enemy of God. And I don't think that's necessarily true. And so I say that to say, hey, we're all working through stuff, but James is one of these books that can make you really, like, question. It can make you really dig, and you got to dig. And I think that's the only way to really find truth, is if you dig for it. Because God might be speaking something that is so controversial or so contrary to what you grew up with. Maybe you grew up believing one thing, and then you hear something totally different, and it completely changes the way you think. And it can mess with you a little bit. And that's what James has been doing to me, but it's been helping me, and it's been giving me hope. And so I pray that today you find some hope in this. I pray that today you find something that can help your life in a very practical and applicable way. So let's dive into it. We're looking at James chapter 2. And I like James because it's like he's probably the realest dude in the Bible. I mean, him and Thomas, man, like probably at one point you would consider a pessimist. And I relate to that sometimes. I relate to the cynical side of James, man. I relate to the side that's just so honest. And I'm in a search at this point in my life. I'm in a search to find truth and to find honesty. And a lot of things are shaking, and a lot of things are moving and changing. And so it's always searching for the honest, truest, most authentic form of what I believe. And so James in chapter 2, he says, what does it profit? My brethren, or my brothers, what does it profit? If someone says he has faith, but he doesn't have works, can faith save him? And I'm like, whoa, James, hold the phone. Because my Bible said that it's by grace you have been saved, through faith. And that not of yourselves, it's the gift of God. This is Ephesians chapter 2. And it's not of works, lest anyone should boast. So Ephesians chapter 2 is telling me it's by grace through faith, and it's not of works. Now, James is telling me on the flip side that it's that you can have faith, but if you don't have works, what does it profit? What does it benefit? And some would say your faith is useless if you don't have works. And so that can feel super contradicting. Gosh, what do I do with that? This is so confusing. Because they're both in the New Testament, and Paul is saying that it's not by works, that you're saved. And James, the realist, the pessimist, the real one, he's saying, no. He poses the question, can your faith alone save you? And he's saying that it's got to have corresponding action along with your faith. And I feel like I'm watching the heavyweight championship fight. In one corner, and weighing in at 195 pounds, 5'5", the Apostle Paul, man, coming in heavy with grace. And then James in the other corner, coming in heavy with works. And what's the answer? What's the truth? What's true? Because both are in the Bible. And so how do you reconcile that? One theologian said, faith alone saves, but the faith that saves is not alone. It has good works with it. Even Titus says, this is a faithful saying, and these things I want to affirm constantly, that those who have believed in God should be careful to maintain good works. So what does this mean for our life? I think that's the question. What does this mean for our life? I've swung so far on both sides of the pendulum and have been one to use, not really say or confidently admit that I had used grace as a license to do whatever I want. I've been on that side before. And I've also been on the other side too, where I was afraid to fall short. And I felt like good behavior would have been a good barometer for God's approval of my life. And both sides, to be truthful, are dysfunctional. And so I think what God has been showing me, I think is going to help us today. And so let's really dive into it. James is such a savage. He's a savage because he starts to call out these people who just say stuff, just to say it. They don't really mean it. These people, you roll up in church and they're like, hey, brother, how you doing? Brother, I'm highly, blessed and highly favored, brother. And you're like, what are you even saying? And James is calling these people out. He said, he said, it's if a brother or a sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, depart in peace, be warmed and filled, but you don't actually give them the things that they need for the body, what does it profit? Also, faith by itself, if it doesn't have works, is dead. He's calling them out, man. He's calling them out. Hey, sometimes you just need to call it out. When you see it, just call it out. It's like, hey, I wish somebody would just actually, if I said, hey, how's your day going? I wish sometimes you would actually just tell me how you really feel. Today sucks. Tell me how you really feel, And he's calling these people out who just say stuff just to say it. And it was such a typical Hebrew farewell. If you look at it really in history, it was a typical thing to say, depart in peace, be warmed and filled. That was a typical Hebrew farewell. But when you look at it in context of you're looking at a person who is destitute of daily food, who is naked, who has no clothes, and they're homeless or whatever, and you say, depart in peace, be warmed and filled. That's what are you even saying right now? You're not even doing, do something about it. Do something. And James is calling these people out. And I appreciate the positivity. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just like, just shoot it straight, man. Just like sometimes stuff sucks. That's just the truth. And there's a world out there that needs Christians to step up and to do something about what's happening in our world. And I think this is what's helping me understand is that James is not necessarily setting a theological construct for how we view salvation. It's not that. But he's defining for us what our role looks like in society as a Christian. What is our role in society as a Christian? And it's not always just about giving money to the person on the street corner with the sign that says, maybe it's like anything helps, God bless. It's like, it's bad enough that we made eye contact, but now that you said God bless, I'm like reminded that I'm a Christian and I should probably be helping you, but I don't think it's necessarily always like that either. I think it's always about just giving a handout. Because you never know. I mean, in this day and age, you never know when someone's going to go just spend money on drugs and it actually worsens their situation instead of helping them. And these people. It's not always just about the physical clothing and giving food, but someone in their situation that their situation is killing their joy. Or even, here's the worst part, I came from the South and my eyes were completely opened for our brothers and our sisters who are subject to a corrupt system that is by default prejudice against them because of the color of their skin. And they're hungry for justice. Maybe that's something a little closer to home. And they need God to come through in their situation. And it sucks, man. And everybody has something that is near to them that they can contribute in some way. And a lot of people will just be like, man, God bless you, praying for you. But don't actually pick up the phone and pray for somebody. And so we say stuff, man, and I'm guilty of it too. So I'm not even trying to call everybody out. I'm guilty of it too. Hey, I'm praying for you, man. Praying for you. Thinking about you. No, you're not. You're not praying for them. And I think it would help us to look at this and go and really develop some self-awareness and go, man, am I somebody who would say when I see a need, am I willing to meet the need? I'm convinced that James is not talking about salvation like Ephesians is. I feel like it's important for us to understand this up top because Ephesians just told us that grace was a gift. Your salvation is a gift. And so to think that after you get saved, you would have to keep the status of your salvation current by your good works, that feels like, I'm going to say this and don't take this the wrong way, but it sounds like BS. That's what I call a bad system. I mean, no wonder why young people are walking away from the church after high school, because it's like all their life they grew up thinking they had to just perform. They grew up under a system that told them you better get your act together and you better stop sinning or you won't inherit the kingdom of God. Of course people walk away from the faith. It's a bad system. It's BS. And so James is not necessarily trying to establish, again, a theological construct by which you should base your doctrine of salvation. Maybe it's a little more simple than that. And I think if he was here today, here's my first point. If you're taking notes, here's my first point. I think if James was here today, he would say it like this. Prove it. Prove it. You have faith? Prove it. God has called you? Okay. Prove it. Yeah, prove it. Prove it. I know it sounds harsh, but I think I'm just so tired of fake people, if I can just be honest. And it sounds even worse. But I'm so tired of seeing like a 14-year-old that can be an influencer on Instagram. Listen, you are not an influencer on Instagram if you have 250 followers. You should not be allowed to be a consultant at 17 years old. I don't care if you learned everything on Google and YouTube. You have not lived enough life. You have not even paid a utility bill yet. And you're a consultant to Fortune 500. You cannot be an influencer if you are 14. I mean, I guess you can, technically anything's possible. But you see what I'm saying? Prove it, bro. Prove it. I'm serious. Prove it. And I apologize if this is offending you. I'm really not trying to offend you. I'm not trying to be cynical either, but I just feel like James is keeping it so 100 with us right now. He said in verse 18, someone will say, you have faith and I have worked. Show me your faith without your works. And here he goes. And he says, and I will prove it by my works. I will, verse 18, show you, but I will prove it by my works. Some say you have faith. Some say I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I'm going to prove it by mine. Man, I feel hope. I feel the Holy Ghost because it's so honest. It's so raw. It's so it is so meat and potato. There's no fluff in this. Prove it. You have faith? Prove it. And he said, some of y'all talk a real big game, but I'm going to prove what's in me. I'm going to prove it. In fact, I don't even need to say anything because my actions will do all the talking for me. You believe there's verse 19, you believe there's one God? You do well. That's nice. Golf clap. Even demons believe that and they tremble. But don't you know, verse 20, that faith without works is dead? Your faith without works, your faith, let me say it like this, without corresponding action, your faith without action is dead. It's worthless. And that hurts my ego because growing up, I hated it. I was a really slow learner. Like I was that kid that failed chemistry, so I took environmental science instead to get the credit. Shout out to all those, come on, that just barely got by with a C+. You just barely walked that stage. That was me with like a 2.1 GPA. I'm just being honest. That was me. Hated school. But I always felt like I had to work extra hard to understand certain concepts, and I really struggled in the classroom. And somewhere along the way, check this out, I learned that I could talk my way out of certain things. Or I could talk my way into certain relationships or whatever. Became a good talker. In fact, let me tell you a story. Senior year of high school, we had this project coming up, and it was like, it was some sort of paper. It was like your senior thesis or whatever, your senior paper. And, I don't even remember what the prompt was, but it was like, you had to apply all these concepts that you learned in school and certain writing techniques and whatever. And you had to display the fact that you had actually learned the content, which I didn't. So there's that part. But nonetheless, I figured I could probably talk my way out of this one. So I wrote my paper about my English teacher. She was like, she wasn't totally old. She was kind of young. So I feel like, I could probably schmooze this one a little bit. Just being honest with you guys. So I wrote my paper about my English teacher. And it was so sleek. It was so good because I was talking about her hair and how her hair is so steady and consistent. And she's just such a great teacher and all this stuff. And like down to the detail, you know what I mean? Like her consistency and just her care and how she developed us and all this stuff. And then at the very end, I gave like this, this like visual cue or whatever. And my twin brother was waiting out in the hallway. And so I was giving my speech or whatever. Gave my speech, and then I gave like this, I did the little thing behind my back and moved my fingers to wave him in. He comes in and he brings in like a bouquet of roses and there's like a Starbucks gift card. And I was like, yeah, man, I just got yeah, man. And so he delivered it to me. And then I walked down the, not the hallway, the aisleway or whatever, and delivered these flowers to her. And I was like, hey, Miss Taylor, I just want you to know, that I know I haven't been the best student, but I want you to know that you're the best teacher. Something like that. It was crazy. It was crazy. I ended up getting a B+, which was good enough for me because I figured if I didn't really work this one, I was probably going to get an F. So anyway, I learned how to talk. I learned how to talk. I learned how to talk my way out of stuff, my way into stuff. I learned how to manipulate situations, manipulate people to think I'm some version of myself that I project on social media. But I realized it wasn't good enough, and I can talk my way out of anything. But I never really experienced the fullness of what God had for me. I always just kind of felt like a fraud because I just taught, And that's kind of how a lot of us are today. I feel like we can talk. I feel like you got a lot of people who can hide behind a post, but you don't really know the integrity of their character. You don't really know if they really do what they say or they mean what they say. And it feels just like a lot of noise. And so I feel like this word was so timely for me because he's saying faith without works. So many people claim faith. It's like a name it, claim it. You can say anything, and it's like, I'm going to have it because I said it. And he's saying faith without works, without action, is dead. See, faith is not one and the same with works. It's the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So true and genuine faith it's going to be real. If it's going to be real, it needs to be acted on. It needs to be acted on. And so he said faith without works is dead, but he did not say faith without words is dead. So the proof of who I am and the proof of my faith is not in how I talk. It's in how I walk. Let me say that again. The proof of who I am and the proof of my faith is not in how I talk. It's in how I walk. Some of the loudest sermons I've ever heard, some of the best sermons I've ever heard were the ones where no one was saying anything at all. It was the ones that I saw lived. And my dad was a good dad, made a ton of mistakes for sure. He was not there a lot, whatever. Everybody's got situations with their parents. So while he made a lot of mistakes, he also taught me how to treat people. But it wasn't something that he said. I saw how he did it. And no matter who you were good in his book. And, it didn't even matter what the color of your skin was, what your ethnicity was. It didn't matter if you had a weird looking face or if, you were a little bit oversized or whatever. It didn't even matter. You were good in his book. And he would probably ask you if you wanted a beer or something. That was just my dad. He was just kind of rough around the edges. But he didn't need a microphone and a stage to be a man of faith. The proof is always in the fruit. Let me say that again. The proof is always in the fruit. And I'm not trying to call anyone out, but so many Christians are talk only. And God said that people will honor me with their lips, but their hearts will be far from me. And so maybe this is why the world thinks we're such hypocrites. Okay, have you considered that? Maybe they think we're hypocrites because they know something that we don't. The proof is in the fruit. Prove it. Prove it. Man, I feel pumped. If you're on the treadmill right now, I hope you feel pumped right now. Prove it. Prove it. Prove it. Prove it. And one thing I understand about faith is that our faith is a process. And so let's rewind back to James, I think James chapter 1, because he talks about the testing of our faith produces patience. Letting patience have its perfect work that you might be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Letting patience have its perfect work that you might be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Something my dad used to always say that I thought was so funny because he'd be practicing his guitar at like 6 a.m. and we'd be like, man, just shut up. Like we're trying to sleep, and it would be every day. We would wake up in the morning. He'd be playing the same thing over and over. And that's a good lesson right there. But this is a total side note. But if you're a musician, you're an athlete or whatever, practice the same thing over and over until you get it right. Just practice. And so he would always say, here's the quote. This is straight from my dad. He would say, perfect practice makes perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And I wish he was here right now so I could tell him he was wrong. Like he's wrong. He's wrong. And I appreciate the sentiment for sure. But I learned that there's no such thing as perfect practice. I wish that we could have a conversation right now so we could reword it a little bit. I wouldn't say like perfect practice makes perfect. I'd probably say like this. Patient practice makes perfect. And God is so good because he remembers that we're made from dust. And while he's already perfected our spirit, he's also patient with our flesh. And when we submit ourselves to his process, come on, just submit. I know that's like a bad word. I'm not talking about a husband and wife. I'm just saying, just submit to God, like submit to his process. And it takes time. Think about it like a farmer. You're sowing seed and you got to wait maybe 6-9 months before you even see anything. Submit yourselves to his process. And when we allow our faith to be tested, we become more like him. In the process, we become patient. And so if you're a note taker again, here's my second point. First one was prove it. Here's the second one. Practice it. Practice it, man. Just think about it like practice. The development of your faith is determined by the level of your practice. Let me say that again. The development of your faith is determined by the level of your practice. Practice it. Practice. And maybe it would help to see faith as something or not to see something that you have to perform. Faith is not something you have to perform, but it's something you get to practice. Oh, I feel freedom because God's not looking you to prove something to him. He already knows what he deposited in you. Let me say that again. He already knows what he deposited in you. He knows that the same spirit that raised Christ from the dead now lives inside of you. And the only one who's performing anything really is God. And I believe he wants to perform a miracle in your life. And if you will practice faith, he will perform the miracle. Practice. Patient practice makes perfect. James chapter 1, he said, when your faith is being tested, just submit to it. Just let it happen. Just take it. Take it like a man. Because if you can submit to your faith being tested, it's developing patience within you, letting patience have its perfect work, that you might be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. He's developing you. Practice. And I want to share a story about my pastor. This is why I love my pastor so much, is because I know that he is a man who practices his faith. He practices what he says. He does what he says. And in a generation where we have everyone who has something to say on social media, my pastor is one who is so secure in himself that he doesn't need people to hear what he says. He is completely content with practicing faith. And I want to tell you a story because I attend Freedom Church in Colorado, Woodland Park, Colorado. Freedom Church CO. Shameless plug. Go find it on Instagram at Freedom Church CO. Pastor Joe Swearingen, Tessa Swearingen. Look him up. I'm serious. You want to get connected to him because here's what happened. Maybe 3.5, 4 years ago or so, I found myself in a situation, and I won't go into detail, at least in this podcast, but I found myself in a situation that put me on my knees. If you've ever just been punched in the mouth by life, this was that. And I wanted to give it all up. Found myself wanting totally just to end my life and didn't know how to process what the enemy was trying to pull over my head. And so it sucked because it was like people, it felt like had been walking away from me because of what happened. And, you know, it was like I was trying to just find some healing and find some hope and trying to find just something that could kind of help me. And it was my pastor, Pastor Joe. It was my pastor who said, "Hey, I'll stick with you. Let's meet. We can walk around the park." We would meet up at Memorial Park right behind the Freedom Center. And we would just walk around the park and we would just talk. And you have no idea how much that helped me, because in that season, I didn't need another preacher. I didn't need him to preach at me. And he didn't preach at me. In fact, let me say it like this, because Psalm chapter 40, oh, I love this part. Oh, ooh, you better get ready. You better get ready to shout, whether you're in your living room, whether you're on the treadmill right now, or you're in your garage, you're in a car. Maybe just touch your neighbor and say, get ready to shout real quick. Maybe you're in the car, just the person in the passenger seat, whatever. My pastor, he did so all right, so watch this. Psalm chapter 40. He said, David wrote, he pulled me up out of the pit, and he set my feet on solid ground. He reestablished my steps, and he set me on a new path. He put a new song in my mouth. So this is, when I'm talking about faith without works is dead, let's talk about this real quick, because you got so many preachers who want to be the mouthpiece, but my pastor didn't care to be a mouthpiece in that moment. He was the hand. Ooh, he was the hand right there, right there. Let's stop right here, because when he said he pulled me up out of the pit and reestablished my steps in that season, in my darkest season, I didn't need another preacher. You know what I needed? I needed a puller. That's what I needed. I needed somebody to pull me up. I needed somebody to be the hand of God, not just say, God bless you, farewell, be warmed and filled. I needed somebody to grab me by the shirt collar and just pull me up out of the pit and say, hey, it's going to be all right. It's going to be okay. I'm going to stay right here with you. We're going to go on this walk, and I'm going to pray with you every single Monday. Let's just meet right here at 2 p.m. and we're going to walk around this park. I don't care if it's snowing. I don't care if it's raining. I don't care if the sun's out. I'm with you in the valley, and I'm with you on the mountaintop. I'm with you. He was the hand of God in my life that pulled me up out of the pit. He was a puller. Let's just talk about that. Pullers versus preachers. That pullers, I wish more people would say, use me, God, to be a hand in somebody's life. Use me to be a puller. Yeah, maybe God's called you to preach. That's cool. And keep working on those sermons in your closet and in your bedroom. Keep working late at night on those sermons. But in the meantime, I wish somebody would just say, God, use me to be a hand so I can pull somebody up out of a pit and set them on a new path. This is what I think James was talking about. Faith without works is dead. You can say anything you want, but until you say, God, use me, that's where it counts. The proof is in the fruit. The proof is in the fruit, and the effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. How about this? Let's just make it real practical. Next time you're with somebody and they're going through something, and they say, man, I'm really going through a hard time. And the tendency is to say, hey, praying for you? Try this. Just pick up the phone and pray for them. Actually pray for them. I know it's simple. It's so simple. It's the simplest concept. But it doesn't have to be deep to say, God, use me in somebody's life. Remember, James is not talking about your salvation. He's talking about your role in society as a Christian. Pick up the phone and pray for somebody. Pick up the phone. You know people who have a need for food, who are struggling financially, especially during the quarantine and all that. Man, be the hand. In this season, I want to challenge you where, especially for the people who feel called to preach and to teach and to be communicators for the gospel, I included. I feel called to preach. I feel called to be a communicator for the gospel. But I think God in this season is testing my faith. I think he's asking the question, yes, you're called to preach, but can you also be a shepherd? And that's the true pastor. Yes, you're called to communicate, but can you also be a hand? Yeah, maybe you can preach, but can you also pull? And that's the challenge. It's really simple. Practice. I want you to prove it. And you're not proving it to God. I want you to prove it. And I want you to practice it. And here's my third point. I think this is what it's all about. And I'm running out of time here, but prove it, practice it, and watch this. Profit. Profit. What did he say? He said in verse 14, what does it profit And all throughout James, you see him use this word prophet. Prophet. Not like the prophet, like PR, how do you spell that? PROPHET. Not like a prophet, like you're prophesying. I mean, like you are coming out with more than you went in with. And I think that's where I find hope, is that it's really not about trying to prove anything to God. He has already approved of me when he sent Christ. And Christ took everything and he nailed it to a cross. And James, I think his primary concern is for your benefit. The reason why he's writing all this is because he knows that if you can practice it, that you will profit. If you can practice it, God will perform it. Practice and watch. Practice it. Practice your faith. Put it to work. Put your faith to work and see how God will profit in your life. And, you know, the funny thing about, and this is kind of one of my last comments here, and we'll kind of wind down, but the crazy thing about James, when I was digging into this, and I was looking at the history and I was looking at the context, James is the brother of Jesus Christ. If you can imagine your brother being the straight A student who's perfect at everything, I imagine you'd probably get frustrated a lot, because I know how that is. My brother really led the way for us in the faith, but sometimes I resented him a little bit, just a little bit. Just a little bit, because it was like he was really just kind of like perfect, like didn't really seem like he did anything wrong. And I felt kind of like the black sheep, and so I was like always messing up and struggling and falling and whatever, and he was like the perfect child, and I felt like, a little bit frustrated. So maybe James felt this. Maybe he did. It doesn't say anywhere really in the Bible, but maybe he did. I'm just trying to think of brother dynamics. But he's the brother of Christ. And what it does say in the Bible is that, he started to lead the church. If you look at Acts, he started to kind of lead that church. And he did not really convert until after the death and resurrection of Christ. So watch this. He did not even really believe in Christ until he reappeared after the resurrection. So why am I saying this? Because Christ, watch this. Christ came back to prove it. Christ came back for the doubters, man. He came back for the cynical people. He came back for the pessimists who needed to see the scars in his hand. He came back for Thomas, and he came back for James, and he's coming back for you too. He came back for me. He helped me. He pulled me up. But he said, look at the scars in my hands. I said I was going to die and resurrect and rebuild the kingdom. Watch this. He showed him his scars and he proved it. He proved it. And so I just believe that wherever you're at in your life right now, I don't know what God has placed in your heart or what he's called you to, but I believe this: if you will practice, he will prove it. Come on. I wish you would challenge yourself to keep practicing the faith. Man, I'm not saying it's wrong to post all you want, but while you post, practice. While you post, practice. That's it. That's all I'm trying to say today. And I want to challenge somebody, and hopefully you feel some hope in this, because Christ, again, is so patient with us. He is so patient with your flesh, and he knows the struggle that you're walking through. He knows the wrestling, and he knows the tension that you feel, the tension of, I know that I've been saved by grace, and I know that you've called me to so much, but why am I not seeing results? Why am I not seeing profit or the fruit? And I just want to challenge you. Practice. Stay rooted. Stay rooted in his word. Stay rooted in his love. Stay rooted in his grace, in that understanding. And practice what you believe. I think one last comment here. I've really come to believe that when he says faith without works is dead, I used to be so discouraged by it, and I used to think it was like a command. I'm realizing now that it's not a command. It's a principle. It's like gravity. It's like faith without works is dead. So I will naturally put corresponding action to what I actually believe, not what I say I believe. And so you can say all you want, but faith without works is dead. It's a principle. It's a law. It's a law of nature. You will perform. You will naturally act on what you really believe. What you really believe, not what you say you believe. And I hope you didn't get offended today with what I was telling you. I hope that you found some hope in it. I hope that you found some grace in it. I hope you found Christ in it. I believe God wants to perform a miracle on your behalf. And if you will practice, he will perform it. I hope the rest of your day or night goes well. I hope you sleep well tonight. I pray sweet sleep over you. And again, stay tuned for more messages from my man Josue, from some of the upcoming teachers that are coming through the pipeline. And again, continue to practice what you hear. Let's be doers of the word, not hearers only. And as we practice what we know and we practice what God is teaching us, I believe you will continue to see profit in your life. And so we love you, and I hope the rest of your night is great. God bless you.
All right, man, what a powerful message. I hope you guys were encouraged. Again, if you guys haven't already, I encourage you, subscribe to the podcast so that you're always up to date on what we're sending out to you this week. Again, this week, we're not going to have any of the other segments, but be prepared for next week because we'll be delivering that to you. Love you guys. Peace.